परं परस्तं गहनादनादिं एकं निविष्टं बहुधा गुहासु सर्वालयं सर्वचराचरस्थं त्वमेव शम्भु शरणं प्रपद्ये त्वमेव सर्वं शिव महादेव त्वमेव सर्वं शिव महादेव. Om Lord Shiva, thou art all things. I take refuge in you, Shambhu, you who are my Guru, who are inseparable from the goddess, the Guru Shakti, who is the transcendent reality beyond the transmigratory forest of existence. That reality is non-dual, prior to all experience, beginningless and endless. She is the one in whom all beings rest, and she is manifesting herself in various ways in the hearts of all the variously manifested beings. Namo Vishwa Shariraya Vishvaikatmyavabhasine Nitya Pratyavamarshaya Shambhave Vishwasiddhaye Shambhave Vishwasiddhaye. Om, salutations to that Shiva who performs the magic of the world. He is Nitya Pratyavamarsha, always eternally self-aware. He is the Ekam Atman, the non-dual self of the universe, whose body is everything. May this be an offering to Vishwa Shariraya, Lord Shiva in the form of the universe. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanam Astu. Jaima. So we're at a very important and meaningful part of our text. In fact, we're getting some kind of guided meditation from the verses that we're studying now in the Paramārthasāra. And the verse that we're going to study today, verse 35 and 36, together constitute what today in the modern yoga world is a very famous meditation. A meditation that you might have heard by now. Like, it's something that we often hear in the context of like maybe a modern yoga studio or a modern meditation teacher might use this metaphor. It's quite pervasive, and you'll find it in texts like the Shanti Parva in the Mahabharata, where, you know, Arjuna, he gets a second teaching from Sri Krishna. That's a beautiful text. My Guru translated it. And what happens is Arjuna, you know, he gets the Bhagavad Gita first. There on the battlefield, Kurukshetra, Krishna reveals to him the essence of the Upanishadic teaching. Do not mourn for the living or for the dead. The death of the body is merely a change of clothes. He learns about the eternal, unstained nature of the self, and how actually nothing that happens on the level of the body, mind is actually happening to the self. So he already learned that the self is untouched by the modifications of Prakriti. Prakriti Vikriti Shunyam, Nityam Anandam Murtim. The self is absolute bliss. It's eternal absolute bliss, and it's untouched by the Prakriti Vikriti, the modifications of nature. Having learned all of that though, and this is quite interesting, Arjuna is a very competent student. You know, nobody can question his adhikari, his competency to receive the teaching from his best friend, Sri Krishna. And you know what else? He also had the vision, not just of Sri Krishna as God in form, but he also had the vision of Nirguna Brahman embodied as everything, everywhere, all at once. So that happens in chapter 11. Arjuna, by his request, Krishna decides to reveal to him the Vishvarupa, the all. And this scares Arjuna shitless. Like, Arjuna cannot handle the transmission, the energy of the non-dual essence of Sri Krishna. It's like too much for him. So he begs Sri Krishna to return to his beloved form. So then Arjuna is appeased by that. So he wants Krishna as the moon. He cannot quite handle looking at the sun directly. So that's the horror of seeing the entirety as one. Sarva bhutanam chatmanam, sarva bhuteshu chatmani. Like, so Arjuna actually has that experience. So it's a very important thing. He not only understands the teaching from the best teacher, right, by virtue of being the best possible student, but he's also had the most profound possible experience, something akin to like darshan of Ishvara darshan, or from another point of view, nirvikalpa samadhi, maybe something like that. You know, he's had that experience. But then you know what happens? Then his son, Arjuna's son, Abhimanyu, goes to fight against the enemy. Kurukshetra, remember, it's a battle that goes on for many days. So after this whole Bhagavad Gita episode, the battle begins in earnest. They're all fighting and everything's going on. But now there are rules of war. And so you can expect your enemy to behave in a certain way, and you yourself are obliged to behave in a certain way. Like generals will fight other generals, like that. You know, so there are rules. War is supposed to be very civilized in this time. But remember, it's the beginning of a dark age in human civilization. So the rules are starting to get broken. No one honors the rules of war anymore. And these rules are so sophisticated, so elaborate, they make the Geneva Convention look like child's play or something like that, you know. But even then, the moment we set up some rules, okay, no chemical warfare. Some dictator somewhere will try to get an advantage, an upper hand, by using mustard gas or something like that. So it's hard to keep these rules intact unless everyone consents to play fair. don't torture prisoners of war, don't kill non-combatants, but it's hard to expect people to not take the upper hand when they can. So that's the nature of adharma, not following rules and doing things even though they're wrong to do, so that you can get the upper hand. In the movie Spring Breakers, when James Franco's character says, "Some people they want to do the right thing, but I've always wanted to do the wrong thing." I laughed for like 10 minutes straight. He just wants to do the wrong thing. So some people have that Duryodhana kind of vibe. They want to do the wrong thing. You know what? Spring Breakers, spring break, spring break, spring break forever. And it's a profound film. But the idea is that some people, they know that it's wrong to do it, but they know that they'll get an upper hand from doing it, so they do it. So it's adharma, as Duryodhana says to Sri Krishna. Like, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I can't help myself from doing it. I know the right thing to do is this something else, but I can't bring myself to do it. So that dilemma, it's not out of ignorance that these acts are committed. So on the Kurukshetra battlefield, the Kurus, they knew that what they were doing was wrong, but they did it anyway. But Abhinava Gupta, I'm sorry, oh my god, Arjuna, and Abhinava Gupta, by the way, comments on the Gita. It's quite interesting. He does have a commentary on the Gita. But anyway, so then Arjuna, he doesn't understand that the Kurukshetra people, on the Kurukshetra battlefield, the rules are going to be broken. So his son goes to fight, and his son gets surrounded and like attacked by multiple enemies at once, which is against the rules. One person should heroically stand up in front of Abhimanyu and challenge him and fight him nobly and according to the laws of the Kshatriyas, the knights and the ruling elite. But they don't do that. Because Abhimanyu is so powerful and he's Arjuna's son, and they want to like get at Arjuna, they like surround him and they unfairly kill him. Now this is devastating for Arjuna. Look, his son dying in war he can accept. Obviously, I mean, the son is a combatant on the battlefield, all their lives are at risk. But of course, it's still hard, Knowing the dangers of war, knowing the risk, it's one thing to know what could happen. It's quite another for it to actually happen. But it's much worse when it happens unfairly. Abhimanyu perhaps could have survived, except that he was cheated out of life. So Arjuna, having heard the teaching from Sri Krishna, having himself demonstrated the qualifications for understanding the teaching, having himself had the vision of the Vishwarup, the universal form of Sri Krishna, he was beside himself with sorrow. See, even someone like that, after learning this profound non-dual teaching, even after having a vision of God like that, even then, we're still human. And to lose our son in the midst of battle because of some unfair strategies on the part of the enemy, that's heartbreaking. So Arjuna is undone by this episode in the Mahabharata. So there's another Gita that appears, which my guru translated and is available. It's a little, usually it's very hard to find, but now it's made more available. It's called the Shanti Gita or the Shanti Parva, the Gita of Peace or the Song of Peace, as my guru translated it. So there, and we'll cover it together one day. It's I think it would be traditional for me to share with you his bhasya, his commentary on that text. So one day we'll study it together. It's very beautiful, of course, non-dual in nature. And there, Krishna consoles Arjuna, who has recently lost his child in war due to unfair tactics. So it's very much like the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is teaching Arjuna Advaita, or I shouldn't say that because Bhagavad Gita doesn't necessarily mean Advaita, but of course we like to take an Advaitic approach to it. But he's teaching Krishna non-duality in the Shanti Gita a little more explicitly. So if you were confused, if you thought the Bhagavad Gita was not non-dual, the Shanti Gita is an argument for its non-dual nature. But of course the Shanti Gita is a later text attributed to Sri Krishna. Who knows how it was actually written, but it definitely has a very strong Advaitic leaning. Now in that text, we get this very similar meditation, which we're going to study today. The idea of like the sky, the spacious sky being a metaphor for consciousness, and how nothing can stain the sky. No clouds, no dust, no smoke can stain the sky. That very metaphor is given in the Shanti Gita. And so here in the Shanti Gita, Krishna is using it to console Arjuna. He's saying, again, like, don't worry about it, bro. It's like, it's okay. You're not the body. Your son is not the body. You're not the mind. Your spacious awareness and nothing that happens on the level of the body or mind can really affect you, oh Arjuna, oh Bharata, oh scorcher of foes. And here, you get a different sort of tone from Sri Krishna. It's no longer, get up and fight. You wuss, Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is like, let's go kill our enemies, like that. But here, you can imagine Arjuna is like slumped down in sorrow, not in fear, but in sorrow. And Shri Krishna is sitting next to him with his arm around his body and just kind of like consoling him. Like it's a very beautiful, very touching, moving sort of conversation. Anyway, this metaphor is given there also. So you'll find this teaching that we're going to study today in the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata. You'll find it, of course, in the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions quite a bit. There's a strong tradition of sky gazing. So in, I guess you could call it non-dual Buddhism, or I guess you can call it some kind of Gnostic Buddhism, maybe. It's a very, let's say, esoteric aspect of Mahayana or Vajrayana Buddhism. There they talk about the sky-like awareness or the clear light of the void. And often there are sky-gazing practices in this form of Buddhism that are used to realize the sky-like nature of awareness or the luminosity of awareness, but most importantly, the transcendence and freedom of awareness. So you'll find this meditation visualization is also present in Mahamudra texts and Dzogchen texts. So in Tantric Buddhism, it's there. So it's very pervasive, it's very popular. And today we'll look at maybe the first few authors who used it. So in this Tantric tradition, you see the prevalence of this metaphor. And it also has to do with the fact that in the Kashmir Valley, when you look up at the sky in autumn, and this is true for many parts of India, but in autumn, when you look up at the sky, it's like perfectly blue, perfectly cloudless. It's just a vast expanse of space, luminous space. So California is a very good place to practice it. Like there's not a single cloud in the sky right now. There's just like a desert. Oh well, no, it's not quite true. There's one over there and one far over there, but it's like two clouds. I can count two clouds from looking out of my window. It's a desert sky, you know, this vast expanse of desert sky. So that's the thing that inspired these meditation masters, these Advaita acharyas, to use it as a metaphor for consciousness. Not only is it vast and spacious, it's also luminous. That's one thing that's very important. It's filled with light. That's why in the Tibetan tradition, it's not void, it's clear light of the void. There is inherent emptiness in the Panchaskandhas, in the world, in the mind, but there is a light that shines in the darkness. To use the language of the Bible, though the darkness comprehendeth it not. To give a Sankhyan reading of that line in the Bible, well, of course the darkness comprehendeth it not, for the darkness is Prakriti, it's an object. And whereas the light is subject, it's Purusha, consciousness. So the darkness cannot comprehend the light, it being an object of light, but the light can shine in the darkness. So there you get the metaphor of sky, but more importantly, you get the metaphor of light. And sky is the perfect metaphor for consciousness because it combines these two things, vast, spacious, and luminous. So the luminous void, clear light of the void, or the vast, luminous expanse of the sky. But notice something else. The autumn sky is very inspiring to the Kashmiri poet and to the Kashmiri master because of its vastness and luminosity. But also in autumn, and this is the monsoon season also, right? So it's very, very hot at this time, scalding. And so clouds will form actually quite quickly. Because it's so hot, the water evaporates. And when the water evaporates, it forms into these clouds. But also because it's so hot, the clouds also tend to evaporate very quickly. So they appear and disappear just like that. They barely form before they disappear. So it's like riding on water, these autumn clouds. They come and they go before you know it. So when you're watching this vast sky, you can see how a jaladhara, the water holder, which is one of the Sanskrit words for clouds, you see that water holder, that puffy mass of white, it forms, and as quickly as it forms, it dissolves. Just melts away against the vast expanse of sky. Like that. So dhumra, smoke, dust, whatever, dust particles, smoke, clouds, they appear against the backdrop of this vast luminous sky, but they also disappear against that same backdrop, leaving that backdrop untouched, unscathed, unaffected. So it's not just that the sky is luminous and vast, like sky-like awareness, but more importantly, it's untouched, unstained by that which appears within it, like awareness. So that's the metaphor that Abhinava Gupta is turning on here in verse 35, and we'll explore it a little bit more today. But my main purpose is to continue the study of verse 32 with you. We just sort of picked it up last week towards the end of the class, and we made a few passing statements about it with reference to another text which I wanted to introduce you to last week called the Virupaksha Panchashika. Now, this Panchashika is a very important text. It's one of the central Trika texts, if you will, of this tradition. It argues something very unique to this tradition. So we looked at that, and the verse that we just chanted just now, Om Namo Vishva Shariraya, that's from the Virupaksha Panchashika. So that's the opening verse of the Virupaksha Panchashika, and that gives us the flavor of the text actually. So we heard Namo Vishva Shariraya, I praise that Lord whose body is the entire universe. So now we know we're talking about Kuleshwara. Here, insofar as we're talking about Shiva, because there is a word Shambhave, so we know we're talking about Shiva, so it would be Kuleshwara, whose consort is Kuleshwari. Now Kuleshwara, why is he the Ishvara of the Kula? Well, firstly, because he's the deity of our tradition. So the Kaulas, the Kulas, they refer to him as the ultimate ruler of the universe. He's the ultimate principle of reality. So yes, he's the Ishvara by virtue of that. He's by virtue of being the Lord of the Kula, he's therefore Kuleshwara. But more importantly, the Kula here refers to the universe. The universe as real, and Lord Shiva, Kuleshwara, as really embodied in everything as everything. So Shariram is a very important word here. It means body. So Lord Shiva is that being whose body is the entire universe. Vishva Shariraya. Also, he's Vishva Ekam Atman abhasine. So he is that self who is non-dual, and he shines as the whole universe. So I translated this as he is the non-dual self of the universe. So you can do a TLDR here. God is the being whose self is consciousness and whose body is the universe. Like that. So Vishva Shariraya, Vishvaika, meaning Vishva Eka Atma Avabhasine. He shines as the non-dual essence, the singular non-dual essence of the universe. And then this is a very important statement, and this is unique to this non-dual tradition. You see, in Advaita Vedanta, what you get is a philosophy of being. There, Brahman is. Brahman is existence itself, in and of itself. And existence is consciousness, but it's not necessarily conscious. Like I was telling you in a previous class, for consciousness to be conscious, for it to be self-aware, requires what is known as the subtle body, the sukshma sharira, meaning mind. So there must be some like mirror-like mind in which consciousness is reflected in order for consciousness to be conscious. Otherwise, without a mind, it's just consciousness. Self-awareness is not a given in Advaita Vedanta. It just is. It's isness, you see. It's isness awareness. Whereas in this tradition, in this non-dual tradition which we're studying together, here we say, no, it's consciousness which is self-aware. It's self-conscious. It's a being in that it's a person. And that person is God, which is what you are at your essence nature. But more importantly, that person reflects upon its own nature in a spirit of joy and poetic rapture. So this word is vimarsha. It's also called paramarsha, creative self-awareness, and it can be called avamarsha, but mrisha, which is a word that you're going to see today in the verse, means to touch. So this reality is in touch with itself by virtue of its self-awareness. So it's the constantly self-aware awareness. That's the ultimate nature of reality. Hence, nitya, eternally, pratyavamarshaya, it's eternally self-aware. This is called Shiva, Shambhave, here in the vocative. So this Shambhu, this Shiva, is the reason for the universe. He caused the universe. And the word for the universe here is siddhi, which refers to the universe as a kind of magic display of phenomena. Siddhi means something like power. It could also mean perfection or for something to be fully right. So this entire universe comes about through the perfection of Lord Shiva or through Lord Shiva's magic. So this is the Virupaksha Panchashika opening stanza, the opening hymn. It's the Mangalacharana, if you will. And it gives us the entire theory of the text that the world is real and the world is really God's body. God is also real, and God is everyone and everything. And really, the world is not that real because ultimately it's magic. So it's not quite as realist as Ramanuja, who argues that the world is really actually a transformation of Brahman, Parinamavada, but it's not quite as illusionist or idealistic as Advaita Vedanta or Buddhism either, because it doesn't reject the world as a void or as Maya. The world is somewhat real, but real like a movie, like magic. But still, it really is the body of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva really is embodied as the entire universe, but it's by his magic, his power, that he's able to do this. He himself remains the unstained essence of it all, who is consciousness, eternally self-aware. That Lord Shiva, I praise. Satviru Paksha Panchashika. Then we've been studying on Thursday nights the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, and in verse 101, we got another very important verse. We learned that in the field, Gochara, in the field of kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, in the field of disturbing afflictions like lust and anger and greed and delusion, I guess moha means delusion, mada, intoxication, which can also mean pride, and matsarya, which means jealousy. In the midst of all of this, gocharam means field, in the field of all these disturbing complexes of the mind, the self remains. Avashishyate. It's untouched, unstained. So the self is not the kind of thing that can be harmed by the modifications of the mind. Even the worst of them, right? Even the most diabolical of movements in the psyche, no big deal. They're just lights and colors that appear like clouds that come and go on the autumn sky. Like that, the self remains unstained. So you can see, we're going to use that verse 101 from the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, and then I want to use some verses from the Virupaksha Panchashika, and I want to show that there are like parallel ideas in some other tantric primary sources, which Abhinava Gupta, he's not directly referencing them, but the things that he's saying in this Paramārthasāra can be reminiscent of them. So part of our project here is to connect you to a wider world of tantric primary sources, like Sanskritic literature, and to show that by studying everything all together at once, a fuller picture can be had, as opposed to simply coming at it through one text or through one tradition. That being said, though, the Paramārthasāra, like we've been saying, is an excellent choice. If you're going to pick up one text to study this vast and very oceanic tradition, it's a good start because it's supposed to be an introductory text. So that's the thing. We're learning now the categories of tantric thought. That's where we are with our text. Abhinava Gupta is giving us tantric metaphysics by explaining the way things work before revealing to us how it is that we can be free. So before you can be free, you have to realize in what way you are bound. And in a sense, understanding the mechanism of bondage, pashutva, is all it takes to realize that you're already free. Just understand that you're bound and understand that you're not really bound, and that can trigger a spontaneous recognition of your inherent freedom. So this is already the practice. The practice of the text is just to contemplate. Shakta Upaya, it's called. The way of Shakti, to inquire and reason into the true nature of things. And by virtue of that, you'll be free. Know the truth and the truth will set you free, as the Christ pointed out. So it's a very simple process. We're just going to learn how the universe works. And by learning how it works, we learn how we've come to be bound. And by learning how we've come to be bound, we learn how we're actually always free. And then we can cash in on that freedom. So that's the project in our Paramārthasāra Friday morning satsang. So thus far, let's recap. What have we learned? What models of reality have we been exposed to? What categories of tantric thought have we come away with? That's the way we're structuring this class so far. The first idea was about God. That was in verse 4. Actually, not really, actually. Before verse 4 even, karma and reincarnation was introduced, actually. I haven't really emphasized this, but in verses 2 and 3, we get the question of guru and student. What qualifies the guru to be a guru? In the text, it says the adhikari, the competency of a guru, is measured by the guru's liberation. So the guru must be free. So only from a free knower of truth can truth be transmitted. So here, the guru is none other than Bhagavan Adhara. In the original text, Adhara means the serpent couch of Sri Vishnu. That is the one who incarnates as Patanjali, if you will. So Patanjali is the guru. And he's referred to with the honorific Bhagavan. He's Bhagavan Adhara. So this is very important. Is this a human being? No. I mean, at most, you could say, okay, it's a mythological character who had human form in some kind of mythological historicity, right? But no, the use of the word Bhagavan, the honorific, refers to this deity as actually the deity, as God. And this brings us to Sri Ramakrishna's conception of the Guru. The human can play the Guru role, like in the sense that the human can broadcast Guru Tattva, the principle of guruship, if you will. So the human can stand as a human intermediary between you and God, but God is actually the real guru. So when you're in a tantric dīksha, a ritual of initiation, there is perhaps a guru, and that guru then does a nyasa to identify with being Shiva. Then the guru, as Shiva, will then impart a mantra or impart some kind of abhisekhams, some kind of consecration. And last night we were talking about the various kinds of consecration that we find in Abhinava Gupta's Tantrāloka. We talked about the initial initiation called the Samaya Diksha. Do you remember last night we looked at verse 31? We talked about the Trishulabja mandala and whatnot. And so we learned that the mandalas, the tantric diagrams of power, can be used in different ways for different rituals, like for initiating someone who's passed away or something like that. So, or initiating someone who's not in the room with you and who's far away, like remote initiations. They're also possible using certain mandalas. Anyway, we learned that there are different mandalas, and the mandalas are all used for different kinds of initiations. And last night we cataloged about at least 4 different kinds of initiations. The first one is called the Samaya Diksha, which is where you're initiated into the tradition to begin with. Samaya means something like commitment or taking vows or sort of like starting out, if you will. So most people who get diksha, they get Samaya Diksha, meaning they receive a mantra, they become a formal member of the tradition. Good. And in most cases, that's all you need. That mantra is liberating in and of itself. You don't need any further dīkshas. But in the tantric world, as per the Tantrāloka, after the Samaya Diksha, after a while, you can get another kind of diksha. This is actually called an abhisekham, a consecration. And the next one is called the sadhaka abhisekham, which is where you're given initiation into the title of the adept. So now you become a tantric adept. And then that diksha confers upon you the powers of adepthood, if you will. So the diksha has an effect, a powerful effect. Then another diksha comes. This next one is called the putraka diksha, which means the consecration into apprenticeship. So the putraka means literally the child of the guru. So now the guru becomes like an adoptive parent. To be fair, the guru was already seen as an adoptive parent at the time of Samaya Diksha. In the traditional tantric world, the students might come and live with the teacher for a while during this period of Samaya Diksha. And then, they might go home and then come back later. Might start families and stuff and go home and then come back later periodically. But in the beginning, they might have just like lived with their teacher. And so they're still considering themselves children of the teacher. The teacher still takes care of them at their own expense. They pay for the food and lodging and whatnot. So the teacher takes on a caregiving role. In any case, though, after this abhishayam, the Putraka abhishayam, that relationship is formalized and the students become formal apprentices, or rather formal sons and daughters or children of the teacher. Then that teacher will continue teaching probably, but the students also play a more active role in dispensing that knowledge. But then the final diksha, second to last diksha can come. So this fourth diksha we talked about yesterday is called the Acharya Abhishekam, which is the consecration into the role of Acharya. So you can't be an Acharya, a teacher, without, like I said last night, getting the authority and consent of your guru. So I gave the example of marrying somebody. In the Indian culture, like I said last night, it's very important that you get the consent of the parents before you marry the person. Because if you don't, one problem with that, of course, there are all sorts of karmic repercussions, but one practical problem is then you won't get their financial support. Right? Like, if your parents don't sign off on the marriage and you like elope and run away to Vegas or something like that, you can't call home and be like, Mom, can you send me $5,000? You're like, she's not gonna do that. She's gonna be like, I did not consent to this marriage. I don't know. Maybe she will, but an Indian parent might not. You might lose contact with them forever because you did something that they didn't consent to. So in the Indian household, you approach the family. Actually, your family approaches their family, and then they have a discussion, and then finally they sign off on the marriage. And then once they consent to the marriage, then they're happy to give things like the dowry or whatever, like to help and start the life of the newlyweds. Similarly, if you elope and go off and like initiate people and start teaching without the guru's consent, then similarly, it's not wrong. I mean, you can say there's karmic repercussion to that, but that aside, what the problem there is that then the guru cannot give you guru shakti. In other words, you're doing the work without the dowry, without the help from the guru. But if you get this abhishayam, this consecration into being guru, then the guru shakti will flow and then you're better able to teach because you have the entire lineage behind you. So the consent of the guru in teaching is very important. So this can be very ritualistic. I mean, a very, very elaborate ritual can be done in which the student is invested with the powers of the mandala. Just by looking at the mandala, the student can become possessed. Avesha, it's called samavesha, by the energies and the goddesses of the mandala. So when you look at a sacred geometric diagram, that itself is diksha. The way this works is you're blindfolded, and after a period of like practices, like fasting and meditation, whatnot, then you're brought into a room, like a tent, a pavilion, and there's all sorts of fragrant pastes and oil lamps. So it's a very sensually rich environment where you're smelling all these different fragrances, some fragrances you might have never smelled before. So the unguents that are prepared for the ritual are also very important. So smells are there, and then things are made out of like silk and linen and stuff like that. So there's a textural component. So all of your senses are engaged. Maybe there's a tanpura or your teacher is chanting mantras, so the ears are filled with holy vibration. Everything is engaged, and then the blindfold is taken off. So the final, I guess you could say, sense faculty is introduced. Sight is a very important moment because when your eyes are open, the first thing that you see, and you're being directed into the room by the teacher and by the putrakas, by the sons and daughters and children of the teacher, then you open your eyes. The first thing that your eyes fall upon is this mandala. And a mandala is an impermanent yantra. So the word yantra refers to a mandala that's been made permanent, whereas a mandala is just like a yantra, except it's not permanent. It's to be made and destroyed. So that mandala is typically made out of colored powders. So this is a colored diagram. So somebody will take colored powders and sketch out a mandala. It's very precise. You have to do it like in an 8 by 8 square grid, like all these things, like you have to measure everything perfectly. And so the mandala is such a powerful moment in initiation. You open your eyes and you see the mandala for the first time, and then you're infused by the energies of the goddesses of the mandalas. That mandala Shakti comes. So seeing the mandala, like say seeing the Kali yantra, is just as meaningful as receiving the Kali mantra. Because the yantra or the mandala is the geometric form of the goddess, and the mantra is the vibratory form of the goddess. And both are synonymous with the goddess. So when you see the mandala, you get a consecration, and that will empower you to like teach. So the Acharya Abhishekam is so powerful because it's the moment when you look at the mandala, perhaps for the first time, and it's a new mandala, and then that Trishulabja mandala then confers power upon you, and that Guru Shakti then flows out when you're teaching. So what actually helps people is not the information that you're imparting. That's valuable. It's not the Sanskrit text that you're composing and distributing. That too is valuable. These are all ways that we honor the tradition. But what really helps others, what really perpetuates arguably the tradition, is the Guru Shakti that flows out of a worthy distributor to a worthy receptacle. And that Guru Shakti comes from God. So the fifth diksha, which I didn't mention last night, which I maybe can say in passing now, is called the Nirvana diksha. So in some traditions, it's just Samaya and Nirvana. You get the first diksha, and then you get the second diksha, and you're done. In other traditions, it's Samaya, and then you get the next consecration, and then the next consecration, like that. So like all these different dikshas, and of course, this whole system can be exploited by unscrupulous practitioners, and they'll make like a what do you call it, like a payment program. Like some kind of like Scientology hierarchy, say, oh, you want to be on the inner circle? Okay, pay this much. Oh, you want to be on the inner circle? Okay, pay this much. No, there's an inner circle. So you can see why this scheme of multiple dikshas can be criticized in the modern context because it's often used in like a cult-like way to manipulate people into feeling that there's something more that they can get, and therefore they have to give more or serve more, something like that. It can be problematic, these multiple diksha kind of things. But the difference is that back then you wouldn't really necessarily be like part of a consumer capitalist corporate structure paying for the next mantra. The guru would probably be paying for you in a sense. Yes, there's dakshana, guru dakshana, of course, but the guru is actually sponsoring you to do all of this. It's very interesting. It's like flipping the script almost on consumer capitalism. Now, the person who's giving diksha, they're the ones that are giving, but actually they're the ones that feel like they are receiving because the lineage is being carried forward by that person. So that person is doing a service actually that's worthy of the guru's gratitude as opposed to the other way around. It's a very beautiful system back in antiquity. And of course, these days it's being practiced authentically also. But generally, when you see like a community has multiple dikshas like that, it's cause for concern because sometimes it can also be like a way to create inner circles and outer circles and etc. Anyway, so these four dikshas then culminate in a final diksha called the Nirvana diksha, which means the liberating diksha, and that's the one where you're fully liberated. But the reason I bring all this up is because we have to remember one thing. Although the diksha is being facilitated by the guru, and in the case of these very formal ritualistic dikshas, the guru must be with the Guru Shakti. So in the right hand path, the Siddhanta, like the guru is usually male, the acharya is typically male, but the acharya cannot perform any of these rituals without his consort, his Guru Shakti, sitting next to him, meaning his wife has to be present. She has to sit there. And in some cases, they can't do it without some of the putrakas, the sons and daughters and children of the lineage. So the apprentices must also be there. So it's a group thing. And as a group, they do this diksha, Vamadeva saying, yeah, exactly. So this is the way that the tradition works, and that's how in the Tantrāloka it's all spelled out quite nicely. So there's a beginning diksha, and some of you have received it in a very casual way. You might have received a mantra. Good, that's the Samaya diksha. But of course, there are further consecrations that can come, which are all very empowering. But, and this is the important thing, who is doing the ritual? Well, it seems like the guru, like the human guru is doing the ritual, right? And it seems like the guru's wife is sitting there. So the guru and the guru Shakti, the guru and the guru's wife, they are conducting the ritual. But who is actually conducting the ritual? This is key. Shiva. Shiva alone, God alone is the guru. That we covered this way back when in the first few lectures in this series. In verses 2 and 3, we learned that the guru of the text is Bhagavan Adhara, no less than God himself. That's why the honorific Bhagavan is so important. So Sri Ramakrishna would stress this again and again and again. Now, he himself is considered to be God incarnate, but he never liked to be looked upon as a guru. Like if you called him guru, he would kind of balk at that. You couldn't call him father, like usually in India we call our gurus father, Baba, we say. He'll say, how can I be your father? I'm the child of the Divine Mother. Or sometimes we call our guru master, Karta. He would say, how can I be Karta, master, when I'm only a machine operated by the Divine Mother? I do as she makes me do. I speak as she makes me speak. How can I be the master? She is the master. Or if you say he is guru, he wouldn't like that. He'd say, you know what guru means? It means heavy. And do you know what happens when you put a heavy thing on a weighing scale? It sinks down. So he was very careful about thinking that he's the guru. He didn't like that, like putting himself in the position of the guru. And when you look at the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you see the way Sri Ramakrishna teaches others is masterful. He's a master psychologist, so he figures out just what to say at the right time to the right person in order to help them forward in their spiritual life in the way that they need. So he's never preaching. He's never there like kind of giving his own ideas about stuff. He's kind of teaching to the student. That's very important because in today's world of like guru yoga, what happens is you get a guru who has their own ideas about things and they just sit on a big throne and like tell you. They're not teaching you, they're telling you, you see. And the role of the student is just to sit there, listen and regurgitate and also pay lots of fees, But here it's not telling, it's not preaching, it's teaching. So Sri Ramakrishna, you can see, like Socrates, doesn't seem to have an explicit agenda. He just seems to be asking questions and giving insights, but he leads that student to the discovery and to the insight that most suits their spiritual temperament and their spiritual proclivity. That's why whoever went to Sri Ramakrishna felt that Sri Ramakrishna belonged to their sect. So when I go to Sri Ramakrishna, I say he's a tantric. And I almost always talk about the Tantrik Sri Ramakrishna. But an Advaita Vedantin goes and says, oh, he's a Vedantist. Or a Sikhi person goes and says, he's a Sikh, like Guru Nanak. Or a Sufi goes and says, oh, he's a Sufi. A Buddhist goes and says, look, he said, Vedas, Puranas, Tantras, they're Uchishta. They've been defiled by the tongue. Therefore, they are not the highest truth. What Brahman is cannot be spoken of. They're Buddha, like that, You can see in him what your disposition is, and he will encourage that in you. That's why he was a master teacher. When you look at the way he teaches others, it's not just that he's teaching to the student. Clearly he's teaching. But you know what else? He's also learning. That's the most interesting thing about Sri Ramakrishna, because he goes to people not to like tell them what's what. He goes to them because he's attracted to the spirituality in them and he wants to hear something about God from them. So like in the episode Visit to Vidyasagar, one of the chapters, early chapters of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he goes to Vidyasagar, and my guru made the point recently. Why did he do it? Why did he go to Vidyasagar? Was it to go and like win him as a disciple or like teach him something about God? No, he went to ask questions. He just wanted to see a holy man. He wanted to see a great man, because where there is greatness, God is manifest there in a particular way. So he was attracted to musical talent. Whenever people were great musicians, he felt like God was manifest there to a greater degree. Whenever people were very scholarly and knowledgeable, like Vidyasagar, and most importantly, charitable and compassionate, he felt that these things were greater manifestations of God. So the presence of knowledge, the presence of bhakti or devotion or musical talent, the presence of compassion above all. These, and of course, the presence of yearning for God. These are all things that would attract Sri Ramakrishna. I think it's really nice. Now, if you're thinking of Sri Ramakrishna as God, then here you're saying God is attracted to those qualities: compassion, devotion, knowledge, renunciation, like that. So he went to Vidyasagar. He went to all these different people. And then he would sit there like a child and ask questions. And then when people would come to him, he would say, tell me something about God, like the Pandit Shashada or something, because he's a Pandit. He knows all these scriptures and things like that. So he'll say, tell me something. What does your Vedanta say about, and he'll ask a question. Or even Mahimacharan, who is an Advaita Vedantin, he would say, please sing that song that you like to sing. Nirvana Shatakam, and Mahimacharan would sing that song. And then he would want to hear Girish and Vivekananda, young Narendranath, argue. So he try to get them to debate one another, and they would happily oblige. you know Now, so there's no such thing as man as God. How can God become a man? There's no such thing as the avatara. And Girish would point to Sri Ramakrishna and say, he is more God than God is God. He is the avatara. And Sri Ramakrishna wanted them to debate that issue. And Narendranath was not on the side of God is an avatar. Like he did not think that Ramakrishna was the avatar of God. He denied the avatar doctrine entirely. And Girish was all for it. So Ramakrishna liked to encourage debates. And he wouldn't participate. The avatar, God incarnate, would just sit there, blink and smile and enjoy like a child. He would listen to a piano recital. So you look at Sri Ramakrishna, you see the world's most powerful guru. But look at his actions. He's like a child. He's just sitting there, blinking, smiling, listening to piano recitals, asking people to debate, asking people questions. But then something would come over him. It's very interesting. When you see that episode with Vidyasagar, something happens. Before he gets there, he goes into samadhi. That's one thing. And then when he gets there, he walks in and he just like stands there with one hand on the table, looking at Vidyasagar, smiling. It's kind of unsettling because he's not saying anything. He's just standing there, smiling, smiling, smiling. And then finally, he goes into samadhi, actually. Just seeing Vidyasagar and seeing his charity and his knowledge and all of his qualities, it so inspires Sri Ramakrishna that he goes into samadhi. Now something happens. Once he goes into samadhi, the whole thing changes. He's no longer the sweet little like childlike boy who's just kind of curious about the world. Suddenly he starts to teach with some kind of power and authority. As I said in the Bible, he spoke to them not as one of their pundits. Right, there's that line at the end of the Sermon of the Mount. People were so impressed by the Christ's sermon because he spoke to them not like one of their Pharisees or Sadducees. He spoke to them with the fire of conviction, meaning he became a vessel for God in that moment. Similarly, Sri Ramakrishna, he would speak with such authority, with such force, and with such poetry and brilliance and beauty, every now and then breaking out into song. So what would happen is he would go to learn. This is almost always the case. He would go to learn something from somebody, but almost always there would be a reversal of roles. The person who we went to learn from becomes the student, and the student, becomes the teacher. Here we see a beautiful principle in our study of Guru Yoga. The best guru is the best student. A guru never feels herself or himself to be the guru. A person who feels themselves to be a guru is not fit to be a guru because they don't understand the guru. The guru is not a person. The Guru is God. And so Sri Ramakrishna, he suddenly became the teacher. He would be in the role of the teacher, but only when he was in that bhava, in that state. And then he would start speaking, right? And Vidyasagar would just like sit there and everyone would be sitting there like spellbound. The room would fill up fast because when the flower blooms, it attracts bees. And so anybody who's sincerely interested in God, they come to listen to such a person speak about God because it's God alone who is speaking through that person. So they come and everyone is enthralled and enchanted. And Sri Ramakrishna is there now going into samadhi, now singing, but most of the time compassionately talking and giving that person just what they need to make their next step in spiritual life. So look at what he's doing. He's performing the Guru function, but he's not considering himself the Guru. And then at the end of this discussion, I'm thinking of the Vidyasagar episode in the Gospel. At the end of this discussion, he says, won't you come and visit us? Won't you come and visit Dakshineshwar, the temple garden? In other words, won't you come to the Kali temple every now and then? And Vidyasagar said, surely you have visited me, so I must repay your visit. I'll come and visit you. And Sri Ramakrishna was horrified. He said, never say such a thing. Visit me? No, no, never say such a thing. See, it's really interesting. When you go to Dakshineshwar, obviously you're going there to see this madman of God. Like most of the people who came to Dakshineshwar at that time weren't really coming there to visit Ma Kali. They were coming there to visit Ma Kali's intoxicated son. They were coming there because they heard from Keshav Chandra Sen's magazine that there was a God intoxicated person, a man of samadhi, a person of true spiritual genius. So they were going there to see him. Obviously, people were coming to Dakshineshwar to see him. Sri Ramakrishna never got that impression. And he invited Vidyasagar. When Vidyasagar said, I'll come to visit you, he was horrified. He said, oh, no, no, never say such a thing. Come and see me. And then he said, at most, we are but small fishing vessels, and you are the great steamer. And then there was a very beautiful exchange where he's like, we're small vessels, we're good for small canals. But if you come to us, you might run ashore. You're at risk of running ashore because you're such a big boat. And then something very mysterious. He said, but even boats like you can come at this time of year. And somebody says, yes, it's the monsoon season. And then M, the chronicler of the gospel, he as an aside says, yes, it is indeed the monsoon season of newly awakened love. I mean, just like imagine this scene. Sri Ramakrishna comes to this house, this mansion, in order to teach the great philanthropist Vidyasagar something. Actually, he comes to learn something, and then he becomes a teacher. And then Vidyasagar and everyone there is spellbound. And then there's this like final exchange, which is so moving. Oh, we're small boats at best. You're a big steamer. If you come to us, you might run ashore. But even boats like you can come here at this time of year. Ah, yes, this is the monsoon season. And M says, surely this is the monsoon season of newly awakened love. And then you can feel how everyone in the room is there, like just oh my God, this scene. One can really meditate on it. Anyway, then they all go and you know what Sri Ramakrishna says at the end? It's so interesting. He says, but you know all of these things. After he finishes this whole teaching, he says to Vidyasagar, but you know all of these things. What I have said is really superfluous. That's what he said. He said there are many jewels in the coffers of Varuna, but even Varuna doesn't know what's there. So he's saying like you know all these things, you're just not aware that you know them. So I didn't really need to teach you. I didn't really need to say anything. This was just for fun. And then as he leaves, everyone follows him out. And there's this beautiful moment where when they get out of the house, there's a guy standing there, like just randomly out in the night. It's like 9 o'clock now, and there's like a guy with a turban in a gentleman's outfit. And they're like, oh my God, this is Balaram Bose. This is a rich man. He's a landowner. And we went to his house recently. It's a huge house, beautiful house in Kolkata, This is a rich landowner. And he said, oh, master, I didn't come in because I didn't want to disturb you. You were talking to everyone. I didn't like to disturb you. Can you imagine that self-effacement? Christ said, right? Like whenever you go to a place, sit in the least of places. He said you sit in the back, sit in the lowliest place. That was Balaram Bose, a landowner, a very respected person of his culture. He is sitting in the lowliest of place, so humble. Look at that humility, And then he just didn't want to go inside because he didn't want to interrupt Sri Ramakrishna's speech. Anyway, then he falls to his floor with his turban and all, it's said in the text, and prostrates before Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna is like, oh, Balaram, it's you. Why didn't you come in? And Balaram's like, oh, master. And then Sri Ramakrishna gets into the carriage and they drive off. And there's this scene, this like really touching scene of Vidyasagar, the most philanthropic person of his time, a light of his age, standing there with a light in hand, with a lamp in hand, with all of his people, like watching Sri Ramakrishna drive off in the carriage into the distance. It's a remarkable scene. So God comes, God goes. Like that. Krishna, Chaitanya, Buddha, Rama, they all come, they all go. So Sri Ramakrishna is God. It's very important. Sri Ramakrishna is God by the view of his followers, me included. He's the avatar, like Krishna, like Rama. But when he comes, look at how he acts. He doesn't come and say, "Oh, I'm God. You just sit down, listen to me. I'm the guru." He just comes in. He's like a child, and he never considers himself to be the guru. And he would be asked about this. Where can I find a guru? And he would say, God alone is the Guru. Satchit Ananda alone is the Guru. The one who created the sun and moon. The one who put in the hearts of parents love to raise the child. Don't you think that one will also look after the spiritual welfare of the disciple? That's why people are always like, "Oh my God, where's my Guru? Where's my Guru?" Hare, your Guru is always with you because the Guru is God. And don't you think the same one who is nourishing the body is also going to be nourishing your spirit and guiding you on the spiritual journey? So, having said all of this, um, Sri Ramakrishna would always point out that God alone is the Guru, and he would say a person can never teach. Humans can never teach. God alone will teach. How will God teach? Well, maybe through them. The person might give a mantra, the person might give a lecture, the person might do all of those things, but the person is not the Guru. Never. God alone is the Guru. See, so you'll see that's very like that in our lineage, that's something that's really emphasized. There are powerful personalities like Swami Prabhavanandaji, like that, Swami Vivekananda. They're all powerful personalities, and they were gurus par excellence. One a documentary called Swami Vivekananda, the first guru. America's first guru. He really was. And he kind of created the model for what would come after with like Yogananda Giri of the Self-Realization Fellowship and all the other people that would come in the 60s. They were all coming in the wake of Swami Vivekananda and they kind of followed that model of charismatic guru. But he himself said, nothing I'm saying is coming from me, it's all coming from Sri Ramakrishna. So notice, in our current climate, we don't know who the guru's guru is. Like we just have these cults of personality. We have these charismatic individuals, and they stand there with a big turban and sit in a chair and say they're the guru, but they don't point back to anybody behind them. Again, that's fine. We're not criticizing this. It's just that in our lineage, we make this point. We always point back. We always say, what you see here in this is not in this. It comes from that. So Swami Prabhavanandaji, for instance, charismatic person with a cult of personality, he kept pointing back to Swami Brahmananda. And Swami Brahmananda kept pointing back to Sri Ramakrishna. So like that, we're always pointing back. But then Sri Ramakrishna himself, the one to whom we're pointing back to, the one whom we're pointing back to, who we're pointing back to, sorry, grammar like imploded there. That one is also pointing back to what? To God. That's why I think verse 2 of the Paramārthasāra, this is a long digression, but I think it's important because I didn't really go into this when we talked about verse 2, and we really should have, I think. In verse 2, we learn who can be a guru. And the guru is Bhagavan Adhar. In other words, Bhagavan, God himself is the guru. So when we want knowledge, we go to God for it. We pray to God and we ask for instruction from God. And God sends a human teacher. But it's God alone who is acting through that teacher to nourish us. So our allegiance is not to a person. It can be, of course, you can feel a great affection for your human guru as I do for mine. But it's really for the Guru Tattva in them. It's for God. And that's an important point, that God alone is the guru. And so in our lineage, you'll get this flavor where even if you have a guru, you and your guru are kind of like almost peers. You'll feel the sense of like you're both looking at God. And if you come and sit and learn from your guru, usually we sit in a circle and God is there, like in the middle, because we're all learning from God. And most importantly, this. In our lineage, the teachers of our lineage will only teach Ramakrishna and Vivekananda or Krishna or Buddha or Chaitanya or Jesus. Because another way to say this is that God also incarnates. So God is God, but who knows what God is? But thankfully, in the grace and compassion of God, from time to time, she comes in a form as a human. So here, Bhagavan Adhara, dare I say it, in verse 2 or 3 of this in this Paramārthasāra of Abhinava Gupta, dare I say it, it's an avatara theory. Of course, I mean, Shaivism doesn't really stress the avatara theory, but you'll see even in the Madhuraja Gurunatha Paramarsha, in that pen diagram of, sorry, what do you call it? Pen portrait of Abhinava Gupta, he's described as Dakshinamurti, who is an incarnation of Shiva. So Shiva incarnates as Dakshinamurti in order to teach Advaita through silence and through a mudra, Maunam Vyakyam. We talked about that last week at the Who is Matara class, right? So we know that Shiva incarnates as Dakshinamurti, but we also know that Shiva incarnates as Sri Kanta to teach Triambaka, non-dual Shaivism. So it's true, in the Shaiva tradition, it's not a lot of emphasis on the avatara, but you'll see that there is actually avataras, even in Shaivism. Sri Kanta, Dakshinamurti, these are all avatars of Lord Shiva in order to teach. And so you could say Abhinava Gupta, according to his student Madhuraja in the Gurunatha Paramarsha pen portrait, Abhinava Gupta himself is an avatar of Shiva. In fact, he's said to be an avatar of Dakshinamurti, teaching through the Chin Mudra. So there are avatars, right, in Shaivism. But here, Bhagavan Adhara refers not only to Bhagavan, God, but refers to God as a person, namely Adhara, who is Patanjali, arguably. So the avatara alone can be the guru. This is another very important point. If God alone is the guru, how will we access God's teachings? In other words, what stops a person from just saying, oh, God told me in a dream, therefore I can kill you. After all, God is the guru, I can do whatever I want. And God told me in a dream that you're an infidel, so I should kill you. God is the guru, like that. So people can make ungrounded claims and fantasize and do all sorts of things when there's no grounding. So who will be the human intermediary between us and God? The human guru? No. God as a man, God as a woman, God as a person. So the avatars. So we say, whatever we teach, we have to teach what the avatars taught. So in our tradition, we say Sri Ramakrishna is the guru, and we try our best to read everything in the light of Sri Ramakrishna. So whenever I'm doing workshops or something, say it's the introduction to Tantra, you'll see almost always in the description of that workshop, it'll say in the light of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. So I am bound by lineage not to depart from what Ramakrishna and Vivekananda said. And more importantly, everything that I'm saying is present in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and in the writings of Vivekananda. And if it's not, rejected at once. I have nothing new or unique to contribute. I only want to say what Vivekananda, Sarada Devi, and Ramakrishna have said before me. It's a very important point. That's what we're trying to do. And Abhinava Gupta, when he composes the Tantrāloka, says this: I have not added anything new. I have only he says this, he says in the beginning of Tantrāloka, nothing in this text, no, there's nothing in this text that you won't find in the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra, which was revealed by Shiva. So the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra is a primary source. It's a Tantra, meaning it was revealed by Lord Shiva. Abhinava Gupta is writing a Parati, which brings together various tantras, the Devya Yamala Tantra, the Jayadratta Yamala Tantra, the Tantra Sadbhava. He's bringing together all these different tantras. But he's saying in the beginning of the Tantrāloka that there's nothing in this text that you won't also find in the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra, either explicitly or implicitly. So he's saying he's making explicit that which is perhaps implied in the text. So in the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra, for instance, you don't get Kali. There's no mention of Kali. But Abhinava Gupta is all about Kali. Kali is like the ultimate principle for him. He's teaching the Trika with the Krama center. Where did he get that? And he'll say it's because Kali is the one being referred to in the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra as Matra Sadbhava. So there are like moments when you're like, wait, this isn't in the text. And he'll say, no, it is. I'm just making explicit what was implied in the text. So that's what we try to do also. Insofar as we're saying anything new, we're only trying to bring out what was already there implied in Ramakrishna and in Vivekananda. So just like we're saying, there's nothing unique or idiosyncratic in the transmission of the Tantrāloka, because it's all there in the Malini Vijayotaro, which comes from Shiva. Just like that, we're saying there's nothing unique and new in this discussion, because it's all coming from Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. So we're always reading everything in the light of our tradition and in the light of our lineage. So having said all of that, God alone can be the guru. But how will we access God's teaching? Through some idiosyncratic claim that God spoke to us in a dream? How do we know that's not just a delusion? A spirit appears and says, kill your son. Trust me, I'm God. This will be a good idea. Kill your son, sacrifice your son. And we're like, okay, how do we know? This is Soren Kierkegaard's question, an epistemological question. How does Abraham know that it's God's voice telling him to kill the son? You see, you can't. It's very hard to understand what God is saying. That's why, if you want to know what God is saying, read the Bhagavad Gita. See Rama's life. Study the Chaitanya teachings, the Shikshashtakam. Study Buddha. What did the Buddha say? And study Christ. It's very important to study Christ. Because all of these people are avatars. And study Ramakrishna. And you'll see they're all saying the same thing in a slightly different way, adjusted to their particular cultural climate. So when we say Bhagavan Adhara is the guru of the Paramārthasāra, we're actually making a point about the guru. Who can be the guru? The guru is only God, but God's best guru is the avatara. So all that we can be is representatives, are representatives of the avatara. We're at best apostles. That's it. We're only apostles, not gurus. Because God alone is the guru, and God as Ramakrishna is the guru. So it's great hubris for a human to sit on a throne and say, I am the guru. That is, in our tradition at least, in our understanding, not really keeping in with the spirit of the guru, the guru tattva. That's why I think verse 2 and verse 3 of this text is so important. Yeah. And so that's the thing. ChatGPT, if you ask ChatGPT, it functions like a human guru, right? It like draws from a variety of sources on the internet. But what's very important is that it should draw from Ramakrishna or Christ or from Buddha or from... So you can ask ChatGPT, like, here's my question, but what would Sri Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita say to this? Or what would Jesus say to this? WWJD, what would Jesus do? Something like that. Like, then you get God's teaching. Not humans' teaching, but God's teaching. So the Avatara Vada, the doctrine that God incarnates from time to time as a human teacher, is important to Shaivism too. Otherwise, you wouldn't have figures like Sri Kanta or Dakshinamurti. It's, of course, paramount in Vaishnavism. It's all about Rama, Krishna. Buddha even is seen as a Vaishnava avatara, like that. So obviously, like the Avatara Vada is not unique to Christianity. It originated in the Bhagavad Gita, but again, it's not even unique to Vaishnavism. It's there in Shaivism. It just might be a universal idea that God from time to time teaches through people, but specific people in history. That's why how many gurus have come and gone, no? But we still remember the Christ, we still remember the Buddha, we still remember Rama and Krishna, because these are not ordinary people. These are God incarnate. And in time, also, Ramakrishna, you'll see, or rather, this is a claim that we make. It's an axiomatic religious claim, so forgive us. But Ramakrishna, like Christ, like Rama, like Buddha, his message will last. Unlike other teachers who come and go like clouds in the autumn sky. So when we say who is the guru, we have to remember Satchid Ananda alone is the guru. God alone is the guru. And God in the form of the avatara is the best guru that we as humans have. And Swami Vivekananda makes this point. If there are horses, then the horse needs a horse god, meaning God comes in the form of a horse avatara. Humans can only learn from other humans similarly. So for a human to have a guru, we must have a human guru. We can't go to the source direct. We could, but we're always at risk of deluding ourselves because as they say, the devil speaks scripture too. One way of understanding that is like, well, how do you know these aren't just your own subconscious sort of, like your own sort of thing? And no, again, like, oh, thank you. That's a great question. Also, I don't know if we've met before, G. iPad DH5QXWWYV7. Welcome. G, Dharma. But it's a good question, G. Carlos, welcome, Carlos. So good to see you. There's a question like, what do we make of? Now, see, this is very important. Abhinava Gupta, is he an avatara? Yeah, according to Madhuraja, the disciple from Madurai Meenakshi in the Gurunatha Paramarsha, yes, Abhinava Gupta is an avatara of Dakshinamurti. He had this revelation. Is it just something you say about your guru out of love? Maybe, maybe. Abhinav could very well just be like a regular guy, and so his disciple like loved him so much and saw him as the avatar. Could be. It could just be like a poetic sort of exaggeration. But if you take this idea seriously, then Abhinava Gupta is an avatar of Shiva, but he's not teaching anything new. It's very important. He's just teaching what Shiva taught in the tantras. So Abhinava Gupta is not a guru. Why is he not a guru? I mean, he is. Obviously, he is, right? But he's getting his guru Shakti, his authority from Shiva. So don't you see how Shiva alone is the guru, Bhagavan alone is the guru? In the Malini Vijayataro Tantra, in the Tantra Sadbhava, in the Devya Yamala Tantra, in all these tantras that Abhinava Gupta is drawing from, they are doing the teaching. Abhinava is just presenting. He's just Lord Shiva's messenger, if you will. That's why the idea in Islam is very interesting. The prophet is a messenger of God to de-emphasize the role of the individual a bit. Here, we shouldn't de-emphasize the individual. The individual is very charismatic. And I myself, unfortunately, never met Swami Lakshmanju Ji, but we know a lot of people who were there with him when he was here in California in like the 90s. And so I've heard all these amazing stories. Like, for instance, one of my favorite stories, Usha told me this story. But anyway, Usha was spending a lot of time with him, Usha Ma. Anyway, I don't need to get into these stories, but basically they're stories that demonstrate his power, Lakshmanju's power. So Swami Lakshmanju, he would go into these ecstatic states of samadhi, and he was so eccentric, he would go into like a Macy's, and then he would go into samadhi like in the middle of the perfume department. And then all the young college students who were working their summer jobs at the Macy's were all also swept up with divine inspiration, and they too started like just spraying the air with their sample perfumes, and all of them would go into this like ecstasy. This power, this effect that he had on people, it's something really remarkable. When you and Usha said once he was just throwing money at her, and I was like, all of this, like, somebody had given him money, like a big stack of like money, and then he went into like ecstasy and he starts like throwing money at Usha, like at a strip club or something, and then everyone is laughing, and I'm like, and one time they were all having a meal in this mansion. And he said, "Oh, drill a hole in that wall." Or then he had everyone take the plates and go and wash them in the pool. So there they are washing plates in the pool. Stuff like this, It was very eccentric, and he had this power of transmission. He was able to really like put someone in a special place. Like he was himself like so absorbed in that state. So Usha Ma, she says she only really understood Ramakrishna having met Lakshmanju. Because that state of ecstasy, that spiritual eccentricity, you don't know it until you see it. Anyway, so what then is Lakshmanju, as per Carlos's question? He's a guru in the sense that Abhinava Gupta is a guru. But look what he's teaching. He's teaching straight Abhinava Gupta. Lakshmanju is not teaching anything of his own. He's teaching what Abhinava Gupta taught. He's staying very close to the text. And notice his teaching is very text-based. That's why modern gurus, they just sit on a throne and say whatever they want. All of this sounds like a criticism. It's not. That's valid too. It's all part of mother's play. We're just saying that in the Tantric tradition, usually we teach based on texts. The texts are important because it shows you that the teacher is not teaching their own thing. So Lakshmanju is like that. So therefore, he is like an incarnation of Shiva. Many people say he's an incarnation of Abhinava Gupta. It's very interesting. Lakshmanju is an incarnation of Abhinava Gupta. Abhinava Gupta is an incarnation of Dakshinamurti. Dakshinamurti is an incarnation of Shiva. All of this is essentially saying the same thing in a slightly different way. God alone is the Guru. No human can be the teacher. And no human teacher will say that they are the teacher. Right? No human teacher should say that they are the teacher. For their own sake, I hope they don't. Because then, like a heavy thing, they will sink down quickly when put on the weighing scale of God. God alone is the teacher. But there are traditions who therefore deny the role of the human entirely. And that's also a problem. So you can go too far with this teaching. On the other end of the spectrum, there are traditions that say, and therefore a human should never preach. Therefore, the book alone is the teacher is just the book. We cannot have any other gurus beside the book. There are traditions like that, and that's also very good. It's coming from a very wise place. But no, we need a human. We need a human teacher. But we need that human teacher also to understand that God alone is the teacher. So what we're arguing for is a kind of middle way when it comes to gurus. Humans are indispensable. You can't learn to drive unless you go to a driving school and learn from a driving instructor. What to say of trying to realize God? What to say of practicing Tantra, which is learning to operate the very complex machinery of the body and mind? We have to go to actual humans who know how to do that to learn how to do that. Just like we have to go to an actual driving instructor. But those actual humans, for them to be gurus, must recognize that God alone is the guru. And so this is the idea. We get this in Paramārthasāra verse 2. Who can be a guru? God alone is the guru, but particularly God as an incarnation. Adhara is an incarnation of Bhagavan. So hence Bhagavan Adhara. That's the qualification of the guru. Then what is the qualification of the student? Mind you, we had this whole discussion some time ago. It was literally called Qualifications of the Guru and the Disciple or something like that. Years ago, I think, in 2023, as part of this lecture series on the Paramārthasāra. We already discussed all this stuff. I mean, this is verse 2 for crying out loud. Verse 3. I don't know why just today I feel inspired to talk about verse 2 and verse 3. I really actually meant to talk about verse 35 and 36 and 32, but I lost the plot and I just went on this tangent. But I think maybe because Hanuman Jayanti tomorrow, so it's nice, we're reflecting on our role as servants of that secret fire of Sri Ramakrishna, apostles of Sri Ramakrishna. We feel ourselves to be like Hanuman, or rather we're endeavoring to be like Hanuman and serve Rama in the form of Ramakrishna, like that. So anyway, maybe that's why we're on this rant. But the thing to point out here is that even in the Paramārthasāra, there's this implication in verse 2 and 3 that God alone is the guru and God as incarnation is the guru. Therefore, the Paramārthasāra is nothing new. It's just making explicit what was already implied in Adhara Karakas, in the teachings of Bhagavan Adhara. Then who is the disciple? Now, reincarnation is invoked here, which is very interesting. Reincarnation is the basis for your qualification as a disciple. This can refer also to the Shaiva Siddhanta view that Lord Shiva's grace cannot activate until your karmas are ripened. So the metaphor that they use in the Shaiva Siddhanta, Shaiva dualistic world, is the chakshu patala, which means film in the eye. So I don't know very much about cataracts or anything. I'm not an optometrist or whatever, but apparently, according to these texts, the cataract is like a film in the eye, and it can be removed through a surgical procedure. This is likened to Lord Shiva's grace, which surgically comes and removes your cataract of ignorance. Triambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukam iva bandhanan mrityor mukshiyam amritat. So that Lord, he plucks you from your bondage. He just kind of removes surgically. It's like a surgical strike, a very precise use of the scalpel, and you can see you're free from bondage, from ignorance. But this bondage, this chakshupatala, before it can be surgically removed, it has to become a certain thickness. In other words, it has to mature. The surgery cannot be performed until the cataract has matured to a certain extent. I don't know. I've never studied optometry, but that's what the texts say at least. So, in any case, this is what karma means. Like, you have to go through many, many, many births again and again and again. From one cycle to another, you have to go through all these experiences. You have to try out what wealth is like, and what pleasure is like, and what a family is like. What is it like to be a king? What is it like to be a tyrant? Like all of that. You have to play all of these roles. And until your karmas ripen, until the film in the eye thickens, Lord Shiva's grace won't really affect you. In other words, you won't be free. You just have to continue going in this wheel of birth and death. So this is called the dukkha chakra, the wheel of suffering. But it's also called the punar janma, marana chakra, the death and rebirth wheel of samsara, you could say. So this samsara, it's good actually. It too is a form of Lord Shiva's grace, because according to Shaiva Siddhanta, as the soul makes its rounds, literally, through samsara, its chakshupatala, its cataract, matures. Its karmas ripen. And once the karmas are ripe enough, then Lord Shiva's grace can act. And then you can be free of your pashutva, your malas. So according to Paramārthasāra of Abhinava Gupta. I didn't really point this out back then. I mean, after all, it was 2 years ago, and so we there was so much more in those 2 years that we discovered in the text. So it's worth pointing out. So this is kind of like something new that I'm realizing. But in the Shaiva Siddhanta, there's a very important role for karma and for rebirth and for just living your life. That I think is hinted at in verse 3, because it says that the student is someone who remembers his past births or her past births. This is what Yoga Raja says in his commentary. So the student only becomes a fit student, in other words, only becomes susceptible to Lord Shiva's grace descending in the form of the Guru, when that person has had enough of life. And the only time the person can have enough of life is when they've experienced all of life through infinite cycles. So the only reason why you're not interested in money in this life, or interested in pleasure, or interested in power, is because you've had all those things. We have no right to criticize people who want money or power or pleasure. Those people will go to gurus who are oriented towards that. We only want one thing: the vision of God. We only want renunciation, devotion, knowledge. We don't even want that. We just want to love God eternally. We will never pray for money or for health or for power. Why? Only because we've had it. But we have no right then to judge anyone else for pursuing those things, because they need to pursue them. That's the idea. So whatever you want, you should pursue. Because it's only through pursuing that thing, it's only through living your life honestly, that your karmas can ripen and mature. Good. So we shouldn't condemn and we shouldn't say, oh, it's better, it's worse. No, no. It's all part of Lord Shiva's game and play. But because of memory, not only memory of this life, I mean, of course, that too, but memory of past lives, you realize it ain't no thing, actually. I didn't really get what I wanted out of this. Like, I had so many orgies, not really getting off. I had so much money. I had a palace, I had a kingdom. I don't feel like abundant, really. Like, all these ideas come to you. This insight comes to you only having had the experiences and finished with them. So the prerequisite to becoming a fit student, according to the Paramārthasāra, in other words, to become susceptible to the liberating grace of Lord Shiva, right, is to get to this point of spiritual maturity. And again, this is not a pejorative statement against those who haven't. It's like, no, we're all at a different place and all of it is divine. But there's a certain point in the journey of the soul where you just remember, maybe based on your own life's experiences, but this happens to young people too, who haven't become a king in this life, or who haven't amassed a fortune, or who haven't had all these orgiastic experiences of pleasure. Somehow they're just not interested in those things. Why? Because they had it before. And maybe in this life you have had it. You as a king or a queen or a royal person, you've had all these things. And then you realize it's not really doing it for me. So that memory of this and former lives is the requirement to become susceptible to the grace of Lord Shiva descending in the form of the Guru. So memory of past lives, this is what makes a student fit. You see, so there are other criteria that Swami Vivekananda introduces us to in the Bhakti Yoga book. He says a guru must be shrotriya, a knower of scripture, which means the guru must be accountable to the teachings of his or her or their lineage. Secondly, the guru must be unstained by desire, akamahata, literally unkilled by selfishness. In other words, they should be doing everything for pure motives, not for money or for fame. They shouldn't be initiating just to increase their sangha. You could almost always tell when a teacher is initiating to get political power. Oh, that person would be a good, I better make them a disciple, like that. So there's kind of this guru wars of trying to get disciples, if you will. So that's already violating one of the principles of the guru. The guru must be akamahata, meaning doing everything purely for non-selfish motives, out of pure love, out of freedom. So the guru gives through love, through freedom, without any condition, without expecting anything back. So that's the thing. The guru must be a shrotriya, a knower of scripture, in other words, accountable to the tradition, to the lineage. We say that means you need to know what lineage the teacher belongs to. Otherwise, if you refer to that teacher just by their first name, dangerous, because then it's a cult of personality. What is that teacher's lineage? In other words, what is that teacher accountable to? Who are their teachers, like that? These are all important questions to ask about our teachers. And that's why today's Guru Yoga world, not to say you can't learn a lot from it and from these people, but it's dangerous in the sense that it violates the first idea, the Shrotriya. There are some teachers who are very big and public now who just deny that books are important at all. They say, I never read any books. I just learned everything from nature. That could be true. That could very well be true. I don't doubt that. But still, even great teachers like that will still use scripture. Like Ramakrishna, like Vivekananda, they'll still quote from texts and traditions. So they should be a shrotriya. They should understand the spirit of the scriptures, and more importantly, they should live according to it. Their life should be their teaching. They should demonstrate through their lives what they are preaching in their talk. So that means akamahata, avrijana, all of these ideas. So the teacher must be pure, unselfish, doing everything out of love and freedom, unconditionally offering everything, and most importantly, accountable to a lineage and to a tradition. So to Carlos G's question about Sri Lakshmanju, that's the perfect example of a Tantrik Guru, accountable to a lineage. You know who his Guru is. More importantly, you know who his Guru's Guru is. And more importantly, you know who his Guru's Guru is. It's a Kashmir Brahmin Shaiva lineage. And secondly, he does not say his own stuff. He teaches only based on what Abhinava Gupta's translations are, commenting on this, commenting on that, based on the exegetical work of Shema Raja, etc. So if you study his Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, you'll see his commentary is based on Kshema Raja's commentary and based on Shivopadhyay's commentary. So like that's the thing. Like these are true teachers in our sense of the word true. Okay, so I'm not being again condescending to anything. This is just per our tradition. So the teacher must be Akamahata, it must be Shrotriya, all of these things. The student must have the three P's. They must have patience. They must have perseverance, and they must have like a what's the P? We made it into a P. Pining. Yeah, that's it. Pining. They must be. The word that we use is usually vyakulata, like this yearning. They must really want true spirituality. They must want spirituality for its own sake. Some people they want a community, like a Sunday church group. It's not really for God. It's just for friends. That's good too. That's fine. Or some people they want money and they think that being in religion can bring them money. So there's a sort of evolutionary drive to being in religion because it's a kind of collective security system. So that can't be it. We have to pine for the real thing. By the real thing here, I mean for God, for spirituality. So we come because we want that. That's pining. And then we must be willing to endure many difficulties. Perseverance is required and patience. I'm just saying that because it was a good example, actually. I'm not gonna say any names or anything, but there's a good example of how some people come and they just want everything now because they're impatient, and it's not their fault. They treat their teachers like everything else in consumer capitalism. It's like fast food sadhana, fast food jnana. So it's like I have Tinder, swipe, okay, hook up. Similarly, I have the internet, swipe, swipe. I found a teacher who's resonating with me. Come, give me. And teachers also play into this because they'll say, I'll give you, but you give me money first. And the whole thing becomes a guru yoga business. It's not like that. The guru-student relationship is a relationship between the student and God, mediated by a person for a lifetime, for lifetimes. Unless a student is willing to wait lifetimes for their answer, then it's very hard for them to actually value that answer. So when someone is just like, gimme, 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 and there's also that, right? There's also that. But I've had many, many people in our lives who are seriously diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, but it doesn't translate into this. It's not quite that. It's a violence, an aggressiveness, an impatience to steal. The student wants to steal the knowledge, not be given it. And that's why they come and they demand it. But even with people ADD or ADHD or something, they'll come and they could be distracted. They might need to talk about lots of different things, but there isn't that violence. There's a gentleness, a sort of patience. Like I will get the answer to my question in due time, but let's go ride our bikes. I don't know, like it's fine. Like that's not the problem. ADD or ADHD is not the thing. On some level, respect for the lineage, respect for the teacher, it requires deep patience. And that deep patience and perseverance implies a maturity in the student. So the student can't be like a child on the internet, like commenting and just demanding answers. And that's why a human relationship is very important. Like actually like looking at the teacher and being seen by the teacher, communicating with the teacher, being in the presence of the teacher, all of these are very, very important. You can't just come like a comment in a video and then demand answers to deep questions. So in a sense, a teacher is always forthcoming. She should always give knowledge to all who are seriously desirous of it. But to another extent, the teacher must vet the student to see what knowledge that student will be able to retain. So these three P's: patience, perseverance, and pining. The student must really want the knowledge and must be patient and must persevere with the vicissitudes of spiritual life. So when you have all of these together, then you have what qualifies the student and what qualifies the teacher. That's my very long digression about verses 2 and 3, but it tells you what the qualities of the teacher are and what the qualities of the student are. Okay, I think that's kind of the first teaching that we get. Mangalacharana aside, as we've already discussed in the first few lectures in this series, the Mangalacharana is the whole teaching in a nutshell. It's the bija vidya. It's everything in a seed form. So the Mangalacharana is the whole text. So Mangalacharana aside, given the text proper, the first thing that we learn is who the teacher is. The teacher is not Abhinava Gupta. The teacher is not even really Adhara. The teacher is Bhagavan, God. Lord Shiva alone, Pati, the Lord is alone giving us the teaching in the form of the Paramārthasāra through his mantra Maheshwaracharya, Abhinava Gupta. Okay, that's one thing to point out. So, the teacher is God alone, and the human teacher must have these qualities in order to be able to stand in the presence of God and give that teaching. The second thing, The student is also pointed out in verses 2 and 3 is one who remembers their past lives, or rather, who is seriously desirous of liberation. So let me just read you those verses. Let's go to the text here. Here's Paramārthasāra. And let me go all the way back to this. Okay, here are the verses. Garbhadi vasa purvaka marananta dukkha chakra vibhrantaha. Adharam Bhagavantam, that's the key. Adharam Bhagavantam. Shishya Prapacha Paramartham. Adhara Karika Bhi Tam Guru Bhi Bhasshate. Sma Tatsaram Kata Yatya Abhinava Gupta Shiva Shashna Drishti Yogena. So I'm just going to use B.N. Pandit's translation for this because actually back then we didn't actually. Now we're starting to translate everything word by word together, but back then we were using B.N. Pandit's translation. So overwhelmed by the chain of misery. Here the word is dukkha chakra. Garbhadi was marana means death. Antaka dukkha chakra. So overwhelmed by the chain of misery that begins with his birth in the womb and terminates with his physical death. A disciple then asks Lord Adhara about supreme wisdom. Look at the conditions. The conditions of coming to the Guru, as Yoga Raja in his commentary points out, is like a world weariness and being overwhelmed by this ennui of being born and dying and being born again and like not actually finding final satisfaction in this life. So you approach the Guru with that renunciation already in place. And then the teacher, Adhara, Bhagavan Adhara, God, instructed him on the essence of the supreme wisdom by means of this Adhara Karaka, which Abhinava Gupta, he's inserting himself now, which Abhinava Gupta recasts, modifying them from the point of view of the Shaiva tradition, Shaiva Shashna Drishti Yogena. So Abhinava Gupta is overriding the text, overcoding it with the Shiva teachings. Although this is a kind of Vaishnava Vedantic yogic Sankhyan hybrid text, he's now reinterpreting it along the lines of Shaivism, but already he's given us a Shaiva teaching about the nature of the Guru and the nature of the student, which is essential to all the learning that we do in this tradition. It's a transmission between a person to another person, a Guru to a Guru, and that light is unbroken since the dawn of civilization. So the Upanishadic tradition is all about this Krishna teaching Arjuna, this idea of like somebody teaching somebody, Shvetaketu's father teaching him, or Yagnavalkya teaching Maitri, or something like that. Maitri. Okay, cool. So we have all of that already in place with regards to the text. The idea of verses 2 and 3 gives us the idea of the Guru and the disciple. Now that we learn about that, we can start our teaching with God. So I was telling you in the series that the first teaching is verse 4, but I'm wrong to say that. Actually, the first teaching is verse 2 and 3. And again, we're wrong to say that because the first teaching is the Mangalacharana. And yes, Riley J, everything is recorded. So Riley's asking like, are these things recorded? Absolutely, absolutely. So if you want to find them, let me just share them with you. They're all available here. So if you go to the Patreon and you click into collections, right? So click into collections here. There's like the whole membership about, like click on collections. And then if you go down to, here it is, Paramārthasāra of Abhinava Gupta. This is a series that we're currently doing Friday morning. So if you click into this, it's going to take you to this. So these are all the lectures. And so here's like introduction, essential teaching, verse 1. So everything with verse 1, verse 1, verse 1, verse 1, verse 1. Look, there's so many lectures on verse 1 because they're all Mangalacharana. So all of these verse 1 lectures, you can watch them, Riley, and you'll see that these are the Mangalacharana, the pit, the central teaching of the text. So they're all there for you. Anyway, where were we? Okay, so we have this idea that there is the Guru, there's the disciple. Then we learn about God. And what is God? We learn that God is the source of the universe, but out of fullness. As we learned in the Pratyabhigya Hridaya Sutra, Chitti Swatantra, God is free, Vishwa Siddhi Hetuhu, and out of that freedom manifests the entire universe. So we learn about God as Shiva, and Shiva creates not out of lack, not out of desire, not out of fear, but out of fullness. It's Shiva's nature to manifest himself as this entire universe. That we learn in verse 4. And also we learn that Shiva has 5 heads. In verse 4, we learned about the Chatur Anda, the 4 eggs, plus the 5th one. So Shiva plus Shakti plus Maya plus Prakriti plus Prithvi. This gives us a set of 5. So this is referring Shiva as Pancha Vaktara Trinetram. He has 3 eyes, 5 heads. So what are the 5 heads? The 5 heads, of course, are from Shaiva Siddhanta, which of course come from like the Pashupata dualist who are practicing with the set of 5 mantras from the Taittiriya Upanishad, all of that, right? So there are 5 heads, meaning these 5 heads are the symbolic presentation of the 5 principles, the 5 powers: Chit Shakti, Ananda Shakti, Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. We talked about this previously. So these ideas, 5 Shaktis, also the 5 acts: creation, maintenance, dissolution, self-revelation, self-concealment, all of that. These sets of 5 states of consciousness, which we're discussing now in our new lectures. about Turiya and about Jagra, Swapna, Shushupti, Avastha, like that. So there are the five states of consciousness, the five energies, or the five powers, the five acts, five levels of the word, four levels of the word really, but the fifth is Shiva. So you can think of like Vaikari, Madhyama, Pashanti, Para, and that which is even beyond Para. All of these all together create sets of five, which is given to us in verse 4. Then in verse 4, we learned about Shiva, right? We learned about Pati, God. Then in verse 5, we learned about Pashu, soul. So Shiva is God, who in his fullness manifests himself as his world using the five powers and the five acts. But then the individual is that same Shiva assuming the form of a fettered being. So Shiva eva grihitva pashu bhavaha. That's what we learned. So we learned about the 118 bhuvanas, which means there are many realms. Each realm is peopled with a special kind of being. So the Pitriloka is full of our ancestors, and there's the Naga Loka, which is full of like dragons and serpent spirits. There's the Gandharva Loka, which is full of celestial musicians, and the Apsara Loka with celestial dancers, or rather Indra Loka, like that. So there are all these lokas, realms, and there may be 118 in all, as we learn in the Tantrāloka. But Abhinava Gupta in the Paramārthasāra does not specify how many bhuvanas there are. He just says infinite. There are infinite bhuvanas, and they're all peopled with infinite varieties of beings, each with their own bodies and sense perceptions and functions. But, he says, they're all Shiva. Shiva alone has become everything, and he alone, Shiva eva, Shiva only, grihitva pashubhavaha, he alone takes on the shape of Carlos. So Carlos G is Shiva. Shiva alone has become Carlos. Shiva alone has become Viranatha. Shiva alone has become Ruth M, who is in Plymouth, and Ruth, who is in Colorado, right? Like all these people are Shiva. Shiva alone becomes the fettered soul in order to enjoy his own creation, to marvel at the beauty of all things. So we learned about Shiva, and we also learned about the Pashu, the individual soul. Just a brief reference is made. But this idea of Shiva as the Pashu is not really about the Pashu. It's about Shiva. So verses 4 and 5 are about God. Verses 2 and 3 are about the Guru and the disciple. Verse 4 and 5 is the teaching from the Guru about the ultimate nature of reality, namely God. So verses 4 and 5 of the Paramārthasāra are about God, and we learn two things. One, we learn this Swabhava and Tatastha Lakshana. So the first Lakshana is based on Lord Shiva as he is. The second is a Lakshana, meaning a definition of God through what God does. Right, so what God is and what God does. In Indian logic, you can say one is Tatastha, indirect, and the other one is what do you call it, Swarupa or Swabhava. So you can explain something in terms of itself, or you can explain something in terms of something else. These are, in Indian logic, two forms of lakshana, definitions. So you need lakshana in order to have pramana. Knowledge requires definitions, and definitions are of two sorts, either direct or indirect. And so verse 4 is a direct definition of God, the five-headed fullness who manifests in everything as everything. Verse 5 is a tatastha lakshana, indirect definition of God, which is the one who embodies himself as the individual perceiver. So verses 4 and 5 are still about God. Then verses 6, 7, 8, 9, these are all just kind of debate kind of things against this idea of God. So wait, if there's only one God, why does there appear to be so many different beings? Explain the manifold. If your non-dual tradition says there's only one, how do you account for the many? The answer in verse 6 is, just like the one white light appears to have many hues within it when reflecting in the medium of a crystal, just like that, the one white light of Shiva appears as men and beasts and ghosts and animals and, sorry, I said animals, right? Ghosts and trees and all of that. Just like the one white light is differentiated, variegated, without ever really being different, so too does Shiva appear to be all these various things. But in reality, these just shine non-differently in him. That was verse 6. Then verse 7. Okay, fine. Cute. But you told me God is unchanging, eternal, absolute. Now you see everything in this world is changing. How can that be? How can everything in the world be changing and at the same time be God, who is unchanging? The response, well, the moon doesn't really change just because its reflection is changing in the rippling water. Just like that, the changes you see in the world, the vikaras, are only appearances. They appear to be moving and changing, just like the moon appears to be moving in its reflection. But in truth, the moon is unmoved. That's what we get in the verse 7. And then in verse 8, we learn this. Okay, fine. But then it explained in sentiency. So the one Lord Shiva is manifest as everything. You said Lord Shiva is conscious. But why then are there tables and rocks? Why are there insentient things in this universe? The response, very beautiful, very elegant. No, there's nothing insentient actually. Things appear to be insentient. And then give the example of Rahu. And we talked about this last full moon, right? Last month, because it was also an eclipse, lunar eclipse. So we talked about Rahu. So you can't usually see Rahu, who is a graha, a spirit. And he's, of course, an inauspicious spirit. You can't see him. But when he comes in front of the sun or in front of the moon, then you can see him. So the argument here is everything is consciousness, but you only perceive it to be conscious in the presence of a subtle body. Then consciousness is revealed. But when there's no subtle body, like in the case of a rock or in the case of a table, it's still there. It's only not revealed. Just like Rahu is still there in the sky, only not visible. So that's the verse 8 response to insentiency. Actually, everything is both sentient. Everything is both consciousness and conscious. So everything is kind of, in a sense, sentient in an either expressed or implied way. Then, verse 9. Okay, fine. So everything is this consciousness. Why don't I know it? Why am I assuming that I am this body and mind then? So verse 9 is a very important question. Why isn't everybody enlightened if everybody is Shiva? And the answer then is about grace. So we get a very complex discussion about anugraha. Lord Shiva's grace veils himself from himself. This will be referred to again in verse 15 when we learn about Maya. So Maya Shakti is a Shakti. Lord Shiva's power representing his freedom, svatantriya, to svatmavaranam, hide himself from himself, which the text says is absolutely inconceivable. Durgata sampadanam. Why would Shiva do this? The answer is why not? Why not? He can do it because he's Shiva. He's free. And in his freedom, he decides to be bound. And because of that, the self is not aware that it's Shiva. So verse 9 talks about the mind as a mirror, and when the mirror is cloudy, you don't see a reflection of your true face. But through the descent of power, that is to say, anugraha or shaktipata, through Lord Shiva's grace, the mirror can be wiped clean, and then you see that, oh my God, I was Shiva all along. So verse 9 talks about bondage and liberation in the form of a Purva Paksha type question, like, oh, if everyone is Shiva, why don't we all know it? And the answer is very sophisticated. It's a deep, detailed inquiry into grace. And grace has two forms, Tirodhana, hiding, and Anugraha, revealing. So Lord Shiva both reveals and conceals in the mirror of the mind the nature of Shiva. That means something very important for us as sadhakas. Do you know what it means? It means that all that we need to do is polish the mirror of the mind, which means bondage and liberation are in the mind only. That's the thing that you take from verse 9. So important, you guys. Verse 9 drops a truth bomb on us. It's not in the level of the body. Nothing needs to change in the level of the body. Actually, nothing really needs to even change in the level of the mind. Specifically, the intellect is what we're referring to here. The intellect needs to align itself with the truth. That's it. You just have to polish the mirror. So you have to renounce all your false views about yourself in the world, and you have to cultivate the right view. And that's it. Then you're free. And why are you bound? You're not actually bound. You think that you're bound. So he who thinks he is bound is bound. He who thinks he is free is free. Sri Ramakrishna would often quote this from the Ashtavakra Gita. So verse 9 departs from the Shaiva dualistic world. It departs from Ramanuja. It departs from most schools of Indian philosophy, except for Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. The more idealistic schools of Indian philosophy, they say liberation is an insight. Just one understanding alone will set you free. Know the truth, the Christ said, and the truth will set you free. Something like that. So anyway, having said that, verse 9 gives us a soteriology. It tells us why we're bound, and it also shows us how we're going to be free. And then it puts the topic down from verse 10 all the way to like verse, let me show you over here, from verse 10 all the way to this verse. Where's verse 10? Ta-da! Here's verse 9. How beautiful. Okay, now verse 10. From verse 10 all the way to this verse. Verse 23, we learn about Shakti. So having learned about Shiva, now we learn about Shakti. So Shakti is Shiva's power, and it's expressed as the 36 tattvas. So the 36 tattvas, the Shatrim Shati, it shines non-differently in Shiva. And so these 36 tattvas are explained between verses 10 all the way to verse 23. Having explained everything up to verse 23, we now begin a new section in our text. So Shiva was explained, Shakti was explained. Now Anu, or the Nara, the individual, is to be explained. So the first thing that we learn is the three malas. The Maya Mala, duality, which is caused by Anava Mala, which leads to Karma Mala. Not Karma, but Karma. So the three Malas, the Anava Mala, the Maya Mala, and the Karma Mala. These are the three impurities which cause Shiva to feel like a Jiva. And then I quoted from the Tantrāloka here. We saw that ignorance alone is the cause of bondage. And it is that ignorance which is called impurity by the scripture. So there is no actual Mala, as in the case of Shaiva Siddhanta. It's not ontologically given. The Mala is just not knowing something. So Abhinava Gupta, like in verse 9, here in verse 24, verse 4 of the Tantrāloka is reframing Mala in a more idealistic sort of way. Okay, then once we get verse 24, the Malas, we're transitioning. So hopefully you can appreciate this shift in the text. We're moving away from Shiva and Shiva Shakti, moving away from cosmology to soteriology. So the first thing was theology, right? We start with theology. The idea of Shiva is this. Directly and indirectly defined. Then we get cosmology. Because we know what God is, now we understand what the universe is. Now we're getting soteriology, which is the idea of what it takes to be liberated, because it's a discussion of why it is we are bound. So verses 24 onwards is soteriology. So we learned about the three malas, we learned a couple of different things, the nature of ignorance, etc., etc. And then we come to this idea of the self and the 6 layers of the self. So here, the verse that we just studied last week, we referenced it last week. Deha prana vimarshana. So how strange is it, chitram, that the atman, the self, veshtayate, wraps itself up by considering itself to be the body, the prana, the intellectual concepts, and even all these universe of ideas regarding the void. Just like a silkworm wraps itself up in the cocoon. So the idea here is that the self, the real self, consciousness, feels itself to be limited by vastu deha chitta prana shunya, by its stuff, by its body, by its mind, by its energy, by the void. These all seem to constitute real coverings of the self. But it's not true. And isn't it strange? So the word here is chitram, which can also be translated as wonderful. So the word chitram, strange. How strange is it? How wonderful is it? How inscrutable is it that the all-pervasive self, which inheres in all things as all things, considers itself to be limited by this body, by this mind, by this energy, by this void. You see? So verse 32 references this diagram, which we started to talk about last week. And in order to talk about this diagram, I wanted to invoke passages from the Virupaksha Panchashika. Virupaksha Panchashika, because this is where you get that teaching, of the 6 levels of the self. And so we talked about that a little bit last week. Then we talked the week before that, actually, we talked about verse 33 and the state. So I just want to give a new verse today, just to continue. Verse 35 is an explanation of verse 34. And then I'll close out today's class with verse 33. So verse 34 tells us, Shrishti Sthiti Sanghara Jagat Swapna Shushrutam iti Tasmin Bhanti Turiye Dhamani Tathapi Tayanavritam Bhati. Creation, maintenance, and destruction, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, they shine in the fourth. Bhanti, they shine in the dham, in the place of the fourth. And yet, the fourth shines unobscured. So we get this teaching also in a dualistic Shaiva text about the 5 states of consciousness, which are stations. Stha, the word is stha, as in station actually. And the self goes to these stations. So the self visits these 5 states of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, the fourth, and that which is beyond the fourth, which is here in verse 34 not mentioned. But then in the non-dual tradition, we flip the script. We say, no. It's not that the self goes to these places. These places appear in the self as the self. And so Shiva Sutra contradicts the Shiva Jnana Bodha by giving a different metaphor. It says, like oil soaks a cloth, just like that, the self pervades these 4 states. So Abhinava Gupta sticks to the 4 states as opposed to the 5-state teaching that we get in the Shiva Jnana Bodha. But he says in verse 35, this is a new verse, Jagrat Vishvam Bhedhat Swapna Teja Prakasha Mahatmyat Pragya Suptavastha Jnana Ganatva Tatha Param Turiyam. The waking state is the universe. Here the word Vishwa means the universe because of its differentiation. So Bhedat. Notice this case, Bhedat. It's like Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. So that case in the Sanskrit means because of or from. So Bheda means differentiation. Bhedat means because of differentiation or due to the differentiation or as a result of duality. So I've translated this as by virtue of differentiation, but the word bhedat, that ending, that vibhakti in Sanskrit just means caused by. So jag or from differentiation comes the idea of the universe, and that's what we call the waking state. Oh, I like that. From differentiation, from duality comes the idea of the universe, and that is what we regard as our waking state. So that's another way to translate this. So the waking state is the universe by virtue of its differentiation. The dreaming state is called light. Swapna, dream, is called light. Why is it called light? Tejaha, due to the greatness of the mind's illumination. Mahat myat means something like great. It can also mean wonderful or wondrous. It can refer to a power. And the power is here prakasha, illumination. So the mind can project an entire universe. It has that illuminating power. So the dream is called the Taijasa, the radiant one. Why? Because of its ability to illumine a world within. And then the deep sleep state is called consciousness. Simply pragya means chidgana, mass of consciousness, undifferentiated consciousness. And beyond that, beyond the deep sleep and beyond the waking and beyond the dream is called this param turiyam, this beyond state called the fourth. Tata referring to that. So beyond that is the fourth. And what is the fourth? And here is the key. Jnana ganatvat. So this phrase here is the key. Jnana means knowledge. Ghana means mass of, or like jnana flood of. So jnana, knowledge. Ghana, um, mass. So what is the fourth? It's a mass of knowledge, and meaning consciousness. It's the self, like we talked about last week, the pure, shining, radiant self. Now in verse 36, we get something really interesting. Jaladhara, meaning cloud. Jaladhara means the holder of the water. Here, cloud. Dhuma, meaning smoke, like dhumavati. Rajo, meaning dust. Bihi is the plural. So clouds, smoke, dust, plural. Malini kriyate, causes a stain. Yatha na gagana talam. Talam means like plain or realm. Gagana means sky. So just like the sky, yata means just like the sky, gagana, is not malini kriyate, stained by the clouds, by the smoke, and by the dust. Tadvat, just like that, the Parapurusha, the Supreme Self, is aparamrishtaha, untouched. The word mrisha, like vimarsha, like paramarsha, the word mrisha, the Sanskrit root mrisha means to touch. So paramrisha means untouched. Aparamrishtaha, by what? By the maya vikriti bihi. Again, the plural form. Bihi means plural. Maya means everything. That we experience, and vikriti means changes. So maya vikriti bihi, the plural. So just as the vast sky is never stained by clouds, smoke, or dust, maybe I should put this word, etc., to kind of translate the word bihi. In that same way, the Supreme Self, Parapurusha, is untouched by the modifications of Maya. So let's close with this idea. It's a beautiful meditation. We discussed the states of consciousness in verses 34. And look at this, look at this. Oh my God, I'm just going to jump back to verse 33. Look at verse 33. It says something really, really nice. It says, through meditating on the glorious self-manifesting knowledge of the self, one divests their own self from all these coverings. This is Lord Shiva's wonderful play of bondage and liberation. Krida, play. All this is play. And it's chitram kridam. It's wonderful. It's mysterious. It's inscrutable. Why do we bind ourselves in this way? The answer is why not? And as easily as we did it, we can come out of it. So let's close with this verse 33 instruction. It's telling us to meditate. It's telling us to think about, to contemplate what we have heard thus far. And just by contemplating it, we can enact Lord Shiva's wonderful play of bondage and liberation. So let's close now with this meditation that we've been given in verse 35 and 36. So we'll start by, again, be natural, be relaxed, just by noticing the breath. So just notice. As you breathe in, the air comes into your body. As you breathe out, the air flows out of the body. And as you become aware of the breath, you naturally want to take your time with it. You just want to take a slow, deep in-breath and a slow, smooth out-breath. So taking these deep, rhythmic breaths helps us to relax into the moment. So just feel your feet, your inner groin, your hands all softening, the base of your neck, your jaw, your eyes, your forehead, your scalp. Exhale and let everything relax. Okay, now, Abhinava Gupta, he almost always tells us to arrive at the heart before starting any meditation. By heart is meant consciousness, but here it just means your intimate sense of being present here and now, the felt sense of your subjective being. And you can actually visualize this as being in the physical heart, in the center of the chest. So imagine now that as you inhale, you're breathing into the heart. So feel yourself situated in the heart as if you're in the center of the brain and you're taking an elevator down, down, down into the deepest part of your being, the heart. And now notice, what are you? That you are is indisputable. To deny your own presence is to affirm your existence, at least as the denier of your existence. So you can never not exist. You are. Start by sensing that. And then now, inquire into the nature of this I am. Who am I? What am I? Is it not abundantly clear, pardon the pun, that you are the clear light of awareness? You're just aware. That's what you essentially are. And what are you aware of? Sensations, smells, tastes, colors swimming behind the eyelids, texture, sounds, thoughts, emotions. You're aware of my words and what they mean to you. All of these are objects shining in the light of awareness, which you are. Now, reflect on this next point. Last night, when you were asleep, perhaps you had a dream. You might have been an entirely different person in that dream, experiencing an entirely different world. But you were there, shining upon it all. You shone your light of awareness upon the dreaming self and the dreaming universe. And all of that was projected internally to you in your mind. Weren't you there? Weren't you aware of the dream? Reflect upon that now. And perhaps also you didn't dream. Perhaps you had deep, dreamless sleep. Reflect upon that. Were you not also aware of that? And now I'm speaking to you, you're hearing these words, you're taking deep breaths. Are you not awake? And are you not equally aware of this waking self and the waking world? Notice the dreaming self and
No.
the deep sleep self and the absence of the world, the waking self and the waking world. They all appear in you, the witness. Are you, the witness, in any way obscured by these things? Can you possibly hide yourself from yourself? Never. You are always aware. You are equally aware of knowledge as you are of ignorance. Nothing can stop you from being aware, from existing. As such, notice now that you are the unimpeded light of awareness. And so we learn Shrishti Sthiti Sanghara Jagrat Swapna Shushuptam Iti Tasmin Bhanti Turiye Dhamani. Where is the dream? In you. Where is the waking? In you. Where is deep sleep? In you. All these three come and go, Shrishti, Sthiti, Sanghara, arising and dissolving one after another. In you, the fourth, awareness, consciousness. And yet, you are unobscured, unharmed, unaffected, just like the sky. Now, imagine the sky, how it's so vast and spacious and luminous. Awareness is just like that, sky-like awareness. And notice, clouds come and go, dust and smoke comes and goes. But awareness, sky, remains untouched by any of it. So as you sit, you can visualize each thought as a kind of cloud. Shrishti Sthiti Sanghara. It comes, it's there for a while, and then it dissolves. Notice this is true of my words. They're actually meaningless. They're just like writing in water. They come, you hear them, you understand them, and they're gone. The word for sky is gagana, but that same word is used in the Guru Gita, in one of the hymns to the Guru. The Guru is described as the sky of awareness. So I'm going to close now by just chanting that hymn. It talks about the Guru and it says, Brahmanandam. Guru is the bliss of Brahman, meaning Shakti. Brahmanandam. He is the Da, the giver of Paramasukha, supreme joy. She is the giver of supreme joy. Brahmanandam Paramasukhatam. Kevalam Jnana Murtim. And she is the embodiment of knowledge. She is non-dual. Kevalam Jnana Murtim. Dvandva Titam, she is beyond Dvandva, the duality of good and evil. Gagana Dadisham, she is the seer who is vast and sky-like. Tattva Masyadi Laksham, she is the very nature of reality, consciousness. Ekam Nityam Vimala Machamalam, she is unstained, the unstained and unstainable sky. She is non-dual and eternal. Ekam Nityam Vimala Machamalam. Sarvadhi Shakshi Bhutam. And she abides in all as the eternal witness. That is the Guru whom I praise. Satchidananda alone, who abides in all as all. Brahmanandam Paramasukhadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gaganadadisham Tattvamasya Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachamalam Sarvadhi Shakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami. I praise that true Guru beyond the world, who is the world, that Guru untouched by the gunas. Om Sadgurum Tam Namami Hridaya Kamala Madhye Rajitam Nirvikalpam Sada Sada Khila Bhedatitam Ekaswarupam Prakriti Vikriti Shunyam Nityam Ananda Murtim Vimalam Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Vajamaha. I meditate on that Guru, who is one without a second, eternal, the very image of bliss, who abides in the lotus of the heart, beyond the distinction of existence and non-existence. That reality is untouched by the changes and modifications of nature. Om Nirupamam Ati Sukshmam Nishprapancham Niriham Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasya Laksham Sarvadi Shakshibhutam. I meditate on that reality who is Nirupam, Ati Sukshmam, who is exceedingly subtle and formless, who is the Lord of all, seated in the heart, who is vast and sky-like. Nirupamam Ati Sukshmam Nishprapancham Niriham Gagana Sadrisham Isham Sarva Bhutadivasham Trigunarahita Satchit Brahma Rupam Varinyam Vimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajamaha Vitaritum Avatirnam Jnana Bhakti Prashantihi Pranaya Galita Chittam Jiva Dukha Saishvam Drita Sahaja Samadhim Chinmayam Komalangam Vimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajamaha. And I praise that sky-like awareness untouched by the gunas three, who from time to time actually takes on a form. And that form teaches the highest peace, the highest knowledge, and the highest devotion. Moved by compassion, this reality becomes a person. Though frail of limb, he is quick to enter into samadhi. May this be an offering at his lotus feet. He who is Krishna and Radha, he who is Rama and Sita, he who is Buddha and Yashodhara, he who is Chaitanya and Vishnupriya, he who is Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi. Oh, may this be an offering to Sri Ramakrishna. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanam Astu. Jai Ma.